Good morning, students. Yesterday we have completed one chapter. Today we start another one. But this is far more interesting than just about the Mesopotamian civilization that we had been reading about, their archaeology, their city planning, their crops. But this happens to be, there would be, I think there are two, three chapters which all come under one important topic, that is empires. And we would be studying about the Roman Empire, we would be studying about the Islamic Empire, and both of them are extremely important chapters from the perspective of a student of history. Okay, now this is essentially the prelude to the chapters that are about to come. But and I would expect you to go through this topic of empires, that is the prelude, these two pages. Okay, I would like you to read, but let me take this up. Empires. Okay. Over the two millennia that followed, let's read together. Over the two millennia that followed the establishment of empires in Mesopotamia, various attempts at empire building took place across the region and in the area to the west and east of it. By 6th century before Christ, Iranians had established control over major parts of the Assyrian Empire. Networks of trade developed over land as well as along the coasts of Mediterranean Sea. Students, I just wish I had the board to explain these things to you. Students, I would request you to read these two pages. Okay, this page and yes, just go through them and. Or once I don't know how long would the lockdown thing continue. Then let's do it this way. And what I would do is, once I finish the chapter, these are two very important chapters, then I would take up this the Roman civilization and the Islamic one, and then I'll take we'll do some kind of a reverse engineering here. Okay, then it would be easier for you to understand, because without the board uh, it wouldn't make much sense if I'm not able to explain it on the board. So let's start another chapter, the real chapter rather, the empire across three continents. Now, this is a very important chapter, and you would come across terms and you would come across historical characters which you have already heard of. So it, unlike the Mesopotamian one where you haven't heard of anyone and most of the things were first times for you, in this chapter you would surely I'm sure you have heard about a lot of things. So and I presume you also know about a lot of things. So let's start. The Roman Empire covered a vast stretch of territory that included most of Europe as we know it today, and a large part of the Fertile Crescent and North Africa. Okay, students, let's take one very famous ruler of the Roman Empire. Let's all of us have heard of Julius Caesar, who died in 44 BC, 44 years before the birth of Christ. So let's take Julius Caesar as the fulcrum point. So the Roman Empire covered vast stretches of territory that included most of Europe as we know it today, and a large part of the Fertile Crescent and North Africa. Students, Fertile Crescent is an area, anywhere on now. What is, first understand what is the meaning of the word crescent? Crescent is essentially a shape. Okay, it's like sometimes we say, mm, yes, Eid ka Chand. So that is a crescent moon, right? It's not a full moon. You just see a portion, the side of it. It's like a sliver. You just see a side of it. So it's just and that too not complete a circle, just about 30% of it. 30 to 40%. Or it's almost like half moon, but yes, but much in a much slimmer version of it. So that is a crescent. So fertile crescent. Fertile crescent is an area, student. It's a farming area which is considered to be extremely fertile, and this is an area which extends from Upper Nile, that is almost the middle of today's Egypt, and the Lower Nile, yes, where Nile actually meets the sea, that's the ocean, the Mediterranean Ocean, and then it enters from Egypt, it enters the Arabian Peninsula, Okay, it turns right, enters the Arabian Peninsula, and covers those areas which are, as we have seen in the previous chapter, those fertile lands of river Tigris and Euphrates. So that is kind of a crescent shape, and that is what is today known as Fertile Crescent. And North Africa. North Africa, of course, it is known that North Africa would extend right from Morocco in to your left. That is, if you're looking at the map, right from Morocco to your left, and then all the countries of Algeria and Tunisia, and then Egypt to your extreme right. So all this was once a part of the Roman Empire. And in this chapter, we shall look at the way this empire was organized, the political forces that uh, and that shaped its destiny, and the social groups into which the people were divided into. Okay, so now what was now from the 5th century on, the empire fell apart in the west but remained intact and exceptionally prosperous in its eastern half. The caliphate, which you would read about in the next chapter, as I just said, in this chapter it is about the Roman civilization, and the other chapter, the next chapter that would come, would be about the Islamic world. Okay, now Roman historians have a rich collection of sources to consult and to go on with, which we can broadly divide into three groups: texts, documents, and material remains. Students, we normally, when we talk about in normal English, we confuse all these three as one. We think all these three are the same things, but it's not. So, and how are they different? Textual sources include histories of the period written by the contemporaries, that is, the people who were existing at that point in time. These were usually called the annals because the narrative was constructed on a year by year basis. Students, you must have come across this term in the annals of history, in the annals of time. So it is essentially year after year account. That's what it is. Letters, speeches, sermons, laws, and so on. Now, documentary sources include, that is, and the second source include mainly inscriptions and papyri. Inscriptions were usually cut on stone, so a large number of them survive in both Greek and Latin. The papyrus was a reed like plant that grew along the banks of the river Nile and was processed to produce a writing material that was very widely used in everyday life. Again, students, I really miss the whiteboard or the black one. Students, what is a papyrus? Now, you have to understand, papyrus literally can be said to be the grandfather of paper. We today we write on paper, but the earliest version of paper. Now, humans have always been writing and sketching and doing stuff, but it had always been on things like stones and in tablets and caves and those kind of things. But then some these things were heavy, difficult to carry, and not everyone could work on them. So naturally, and not you could not document too much of stuff either. It would use to take a lot of space. So naturally, as humans were getting the human whole society was getting more complex, and humans were getting also smarter. They came up with the earliest version of paper, that is known as papyrus. Okay, now papyrus is a reed-like plant. Now, what is a reed-like plant? Now, reed-like plant is like a very tall kind of plant, but it's a plant, it's not a tree. It's a tall kind of a grass, essentially, okay, which usually grows on the river sides. It needs a lot of water to grow. It can't actually grow in the arid areas. So here in Egypt, naturally, that grass used to grow on the banks of River Nile, and that was extracted, and the inner stem, not the outer stem. Outer stem would only have fiber. The inner stem of that would be then used for it would be soaked in water, and then they would use it to make it thin, and then they would club it together, and then they would try and make a paper out of it. Papyrus, but not exactly a paper. It would be very fibrous. Students, it's like The best example, or which comes very close to the papyrus thing, is some of you wear linen shirts, and you've heard of linen cloth and fiber. Linen is almost like this. Okay, it or the plant linen. Linen is, students, you need to understand, it is not like cotton, whereby you know, a pod comes out and it's a flower and then you make yarns out of it. No, linen, what you use is essentially a plant. You use the whole plant. It's again, the plant is made of flax, and then that's how it is. So long story short, and that is how it is. So papyrus plant is almost like the linen manufacturing, the flax plant, which is used to finally manufacture linen. So coming to the point, thousands of contracts, accounts, letters, and official documents survive on papyrus and have been published by scholars who are called papyrologists. Material remains include a very wide assortment of items that maintain archaeologists discover, for example, through excavation and field survey. Uh, Now, the two most powerful empires that ruled over most of Europe, coming here to, yeah, that's how now we start. Students, this is a map. This is a map which you should surely remember, and this is because we would be studying the history and the main characters of this area. The whole Roman civilization is this area. The Roman Empire is in this area. Except one problem that there is, if you look at the map, students, if you look at the map, this is a place as Constantinople. Now, I would just like to tell you one very important fact here. Uh, the Constantinople, or the land between, or this isthmus, that's what it is known as. Uh, Here, between the Aegean Sea and the Black Sea, it is not is this thick. It can't be this thick. Constantinople uh, and agency, it can never be this thick. So I think you need to consult the map. I'm sure map the the Google map would have a better image of it, because Black Sea is not completely landlocked this way. Okay. Yes. So, coming to the two powerful empires ruled over most of Europe, North Africa, and Middle East in the period between the birth of Christ and the early part of the 7th century, say down to 630s. The two empires were those of Rome and Iran. That is, the Romans and the Iranians were rivals and fought against each other for much of their history. In fact, Iranians used to fight even the Greeks for that matter, and not just the Romans. Their empires lay, but that was the Persian Empire that we are talking about, not the Iranian as such. Their empires lay next to each other, separated only by a narrow strip of land. That land that ran along the river Euphrates. And in this chapter, we shall be looking at the Roman Empire, but we should also refer in passing to Rome's rival, Iran. Okay, thank you. And we should continue. But students, just look at this map and try to learn it by heart. A lot of questions come from this map. This looks like a small map, but you would get many, many questions from this map. And if you can understand this map properly, you would be able to understand the chapter. Thank you.